This is the B&O Sports Show with your hosts, Tanner Ballard and Garrett Otto.
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're listening to this. This is going to be the fourth week of the B&O Sports Show here. I'm Garrett Otto, alongside Tanner Ballard. Tanner, how you doing today?
Doing pretty well. I'm doing very well. It's the Christmas season. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone who's listening. How about yourself, Garrett?
You know, I'm doing well. I'm sitting here on December 23rd, and it has absolutely just been pouring outside in Chicago.
Same.
Which is really weird.
Same.
I woke up to thunder when really I should be waking up and it should be like just snowing a little bit. But that's been the kind of year it's been. I went downtown yesterday. It was pretty nice, but just not today. It's a high of 61, keep in mind, on December 23rd. I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah.
It's too much for me, really.
Yeah, no, we got the same kind of weather down here in Georgia. We're looking at well, it's been rainy all day today, but we're looking at like a 76-degree Christmas. That's kind of strange.
Holy smokes.
It's kind of strange. But it's still supposed to be cloudy and just kind of, not so bright. But that's okay. Christmas season keeps everybody happy. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into this podcast. Hey, before we start, a quick sports shout-out, as we're going to call it. Shout-out to Zach Hodgkins. He is a Florida Gator walk-on. He walked onto the basketball team in Gainesville at the University of Florida. He was born with one hand. So this is a guy, Zach Hodgkins, who goes out there and he scores his first basket in the Gators' 89-65 victory over Jacksonville. It was a huge moment for him. Obviously, it was a huge moment for the Gators basketball team. They were all just hyped when he put that thing in, and it was an and one. So good for him. It's great to see people like him who, were born with, things that give them challenges in life, but obviously he's overcoming those challenges, and what a moment for him and what a moment for the Gators basketball team. So congratulations to Zach Hodgkins.
Yeah, good for him. Man, so I guess now, if this is a football podcast, maybe we should, is this where we're supposed to jump into football?
I think this is where we're supposed to jump into football, yeah.
So we should probably jump into Week 15, which had some pretty good games, had a little bit of controversy. It was a good week for football. Man, we started off on Thursday night with a marquee match, great matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the St. Louis Rams. Rams pulling that one out at home, 31-23. They did go 5-3 at home, but that could have been their last game in St. Louis.
Yeah, and I was hearing before the game that they were having to have some like extra security at the St. Louis Rams home there, and they, I guess I'm not really. I guess people want to like steal some stuff, like you're gonna bring your hacksaw into the game and just cut up some chairs and be like, yeah, I'm gonna take this home. I mean, it's it's understandable that the fans in St. Louis would be sad that team could be potentially moving to Los Angeles. Now, this is all potential stuff. This is not confirmed, but yeah, I mean, St. Louis isn't. They've not really ever been that successful in St. Louis, have they? So, who knows?
And it's kind of like you said, this isn't for sure. It seems like this happens, at least recently, almost every year, that there's this discussion that they're going to be moving, and the only place that they're ever discussed to be moving to is L.A., which, I mean, understandable.
Yeah.
Man, I think people underestimate how much, like, a sports team means to a city. Everyone kind of looks at it like, oh, St. Louis doesn't have that, many fans. They rarely ever sell out games and fill the stands. But there's a ton of people in that city who are so devoted to that team and, watch them every week, go to the game as much as they can, buy their jerseys, and it creates so much for that city that, yeah, I wish every city could have that, but I think it's tough just to take that away from a city altogether. I don't know. LA would be a great place for a team, but there's so many teams in California.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hate to see any team have to actually leave the city and leave a lot of fans disappointed.
Yeah, and St. Louis they're a passionate group there for their teams. Of course, they have the Blues hockey team and the Cardinals, their baseball team, and they are very passionate about their sports teams there, and it would be unfortunate, I'm sure, for them to see the Rams leave St. Louis, but they were pleased, at least that night, when the Rams pulled off a 31-23 victory. The Rams started off early. They started off well on the offensive side of things. The defense did enough to keep the Buccaneers at bay, but the Bucs trying to make a nice little comeback. They had a 17-point fourth quarter, but in the end, what the Rams has already built up was too big of a wall to climb for the Bucs, and like I said, it ended up being a Rams victory. So then we had one of those strange Saturday games. How do you feel about those, Garrett?
I'm okay with them as long as the NFL doesn't try and push it to be like an every week type of thing. I guess I get it at the end of the season where they're trying to kind of stretch out their viewership, and college football, the bowl games aren't like crazy good right now. But man, I hope they're not like seriously considering making this a routine thing in upcoming seasons, because they've already got a Thursday game, they've got their Sunday huge slate of games, and a Monday night game, which I like. I'm even a little skeptical on the Thursday night games because it's just randomly in the middle of the week, and it's like a short week for the teams.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to push it to London and everything. I think they just kind of have to
just stick with their guns.
Know their boundaries. They've got a good thing going. Don't try and push it too much.
Yep.
But that Saturday night game, the Jets pulled out an important win against their division rivals, the Cowboys. Probably was a little closer than they would have wanted it to be. It was man, it's been a rough season for the whole entire Cowboys team, but especially all the quarterbacks. The quarterback who started the game played the most time in the game, Kellen Moore, had 3 interceptions. He had a tough quarterback rating of 52.2, which, if you know a little bit about football, isn't good. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, he was all right. 26 for 39, 300 yards, 1 touchdown. But I guess you could say they got it done. They did what they needed to do. They keep themselves in the hunt for the playoffs. Right now, they're currently the last team out. They're the 7th seed right now, if you wanted to put them in a seed. But they have the same record as the Steelers and the Chiefs, so they're there. They're there. They'll make an effort.
Yeah, you were talking about the Cowboys, and it's tough for them because it seems like for the past couple of seasons they've come into the season with big expectations. Tony Romo and Des Bryant will lead their offense out there, and they've got a classy guy in Jason Witten who's out there, and they always have this hype coming into the season, and then something eventually goes wrong, like it did this year. Seems like the most common theme has been the Tony Romo injury, but what do you see for them going forward as far as next year and the years to come? I mean, what do you think they have to do to become, the team that Jerry Jones wants them to be?
Man, I think if Tony Romo can stay healthy and play well, I mean, in my opinion, he's a good quarterback. He's definitely got the talent to be there. He's got to stay healthy. Des Bryant's good. Really, these past seasons, it's almost always been injuries.
Yeah.
They lose a lot of players consistently, but I think if their team can stay healthy, I know Tony Romo's getting old, so we'll see what happens to him next year, but if he's all good for next year, they definitely could be a force. Where are you putting them for next year?
Yeah, it's really tough to place them next year because, like you said, it's been really dependent on whether or not Tony Romo is healthy. It'll be interesting to see where they go in the draft, see what kind of, see if they'll go after a quarterback and try to, have a franchise quarterback for the future, seeing that Tony Romo is, seems to be struggling with staying healthy Like you said, it's gonna be tough to place them. I just can't see them with. If they don't have any injuries, I can see them being a team that can get a wild card spot and make it into the playoffs. I just can't see them going very far into the playoffs. But again, that's all reliant upon their quarterback staying healthy and the bulk of their team staying healthy, especially the guys like Des Bryant. He has to stay healthy too. So tough.
Well, yeah,
Go ahead.
you mentioned, I was just going to say, you mentioned a wild card, but the NFC East hasn't looked spectacular. I guess the Redskins look like they're coming around, but Cowboys, possibly. I do think you mentioned a wild card spot, but I think that they could actually win their division, in my opinion.
I would agree. They can either win their division or they can get the wild card spot. Again, it's all dependent on whether or not they have their injuries. I guess if they do stay healthy, I can see them winning their division. But like you said, all of a sudden some of these teams that are in their division are starting to. I could see those teams being competition for them as far as interdivision play goes. But we'll see. We'll see what happens next year. So we said that the Jets pulled off that win. Ryan Fitzpatrick had just about 300 yards and a touchdown. So then we jump. That was the Saturday game again. Those strange Saturday games. We jump ahead into the Sunday matchups. The Bears and the Vikings, a little NFC North matchup, and the Vikings pull out another important win. And they're still staying alive, 9-5, and their offense. If you take a look at what they were able to do, they scored in every quarter. They scored at least a touchdown in every quarter, and their offense is really consistent, and that's going to be key for them going forward, especially if they're going to make a run in the playoffs. You take a look at the numbers. Adrian Peterson didn't have a huge game, 63 yards of 18 carries. Teddy Bridgewater is doing what he needs to do to get it done, though. 4 touchdowns for him. So a big victory for the Vikings. They ended up winning 38-17 over the Bears. Was there anything in particular that you liked from that game, Garrett?
I think Bridgewater did look good. He managed the game as well as he needed to against a struggling Bears team. Jerick McKinnon had a good game. He had 4 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. He was the leading receiver, actually, which is weird. Stephon Diggs, I think he started off really well. He's kind of been a little bit quieter, especially yardage-wise. Mike Wallace, man, I remember when Mike Wallace was considered really good, and now he barely touches the ball. That's going to be a fun one to watch. The NFC North, watch that one play out over the next 2 weeks, because as we'll get to a little later on, the Packers have a tough matchup next week, and the Vikings have what looks to be an easier matchup. And if the Packers lose and the Vikings win, it sets up a showdown in Week 17 to decide that division. So
yeah, that'll be fun.
That's going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for that one. Then the next couple games, really not too much exciting. The Falcons getting a win over the Jaguars, finally showing up again. The Texans, I think a good team. They could just get a few things to work. I think they could be really good. They get the win 16-10 over the Colts. But then we get to an interesting one. And this has been a hot topic all week. It's probably been the hottest topic in the NFL.
For sure.
Really, if you look at it. The Panthers and the Giants. So I think everyone's heard about it, but Tanner, if you want to explain what happened in that game.
Well, before we get into the big debacle with OBJ and Josh Norman, just a quick look at the scoreline. The Panthers ended up winning by 3 points. Now that's the Giants are a 6-8 team after that game. Panthers are still undefeated, but especially in the fourth quarter, it looks the Giants came out and they scored 3 touchdowns. So they and then in the fourth quarter the Panthers only had a field goal. So they obviously put a lot of pressure on the Panthers. That was, probably the toughest game of the year for the Panthers. That or the game against the Packers, I think. So it was a big matchup, a big game. Cam Newton did what he had to do, scored 5 touchdowns in that one. But yeah, like Garrett was saying, the big matchup, or the big debate after the game really was the Josh Norman and Odell Beckham Jr. situation. If you live in a cave or something and you weren't able to see what happened, basically Josh Norman, the Carolina Panthers cornerback, and Odell Beckham Jr., the star wide receiver for the Giants, they went at it. Now, we knew before this game that they were going to be matched up. Josh Norman is obviously one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and OBJ is one of the best wide receivers in the game, so we knew that there was going to be a big matchup there. But what ensued was not really what people expected. I mean, what ended up happening is just absolute nonsense. Both players just taking cheap shots at each other, extracurricular stuff, and then Odell Beckham Jr. ended up taking a really just lousy cheap shot right into the head, neck area of Josh Norman. And, I mean, ultimately, Odell Beckham Jr. could have hurt himself, and he could have hurt Josh Norman. So that's a really big problem for the NFL, with their work to try to keep players safe on the field. So the NFL did suspend Odell Beckham Jr. for 1 game. However, he is appealing that suspension, and if I'm not mistaken, that appeal is scheduled to be heard today. So we'll see what comes from that, see if the NFL lets him go. On the flip side, Josh Norman was fined $26,044. All right, so keep $44. It just couldn't be 26. Had to be $44. I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't know where the NFL comes up with these numbers.
I think Roger Goodell actually, he spent more than he was expecting to on dinner in a week.
He spent $44
had
more?
to compensate for it. Yeah, he went over, and he's like, all right.
Gotta throw that $44
tack on
in
the
there.
extra 44.
Fair enough. Yeah. So that was I know a lot of fans say, well, this is great for the NFL. I love this extracurricular and fighting and stuff, but that's really not what makes football the game that it is, the great game that it is. It was really unnecessary, I think. I mean, all that stuff it just doesn't need to be happening on the football field. Now, the referees, they handed out plenty of personal fouls and, they made the calls, but at some point you were thinking that maybe both of the players just should have been completely ejected from the game. It's just, like I said, it's just not what makes football. It's not what makes the game enjoyable, in my opinion. I want to see big plays on both sides of the offense, not this extracurricular stuff where 2 guys are punching each other and trying to hurt each other. That's not fun. But like we said, ultimately what happened in the end of the game, the Panthers beat the Giants to maintain their perfect record, and they are just steamrolling ahead in the NFC towards that playoff. Jumping ahead, the next game was the Titans and the Patriots. Patriots didn't really have a difficult time beating the Titans. They ended up winning that game 33-16. Marcus Mariota goes down with a pretty bad injury, didn't he?
Yeah, he hasn't been officially ruled out for the season, but you would assume with them spending a top pick on him, and their season is over at 3-11, that they will probably. I don't see any reason for them to really play him in a situation where they don't need him to. Patriots look good. Patriots, I think an important thing for them, Julian Edelman, he's been practicing. He wasn't expected to be able to come back, really, I don't think, at all during the season, especially not the regular season. And now he looks like he might even pick up a questionable or probable designation for this upcoming game, which is huge for the Patriots because they've been hit so hard with injuries. I mean, overall, but especially on offense, and to have their number 1 receiver come back would be really big for them. So that's kind of a not during the game, but definitely a big thing for them. The Bills and Redskins, Kirk Cousins, man, you like that? He put up 319 yards and 4 touchdowns on only 22 completed passes. He only missed or had 6 incomplete passes. He looked good. Deshaun Jackson, still alive, still doing well.
Still alive.
153 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, the Redskins, they look pretty good, dude. Isn't it amazing that now that Kirk Cousins is he's picking up his game and the Redskins are actually decent. They're a 500 team right now. When was the last time you ever heard anything about Robert Griffin III?
Oh, man. No, I have not heard anything from him I don't even know. I don't know if I've heard anything from him this season, let alone, the off season. I don't know. Although, I may have heard something about trade rumors. Though I can't really remember what team. Might have been the Eagles, might have been Philadelphia, but
I remember hearing rumors about him possibly going. Gruden is not his fan. He's not his number one fan. He's not his number two. He's
he's
him
not
and
even on the
Gruden
list.
just don't. Yeah, I don't think they get along very well. We'll see. I like the Redskins though. I don't like them, but I like the way they're playing. Basically,
Sure.
The Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, I think everyone knew what would happen in that game going into it, and it did. Chiefs winning 34-13 at a couple of defensive touchdowns. Jimmy Clausen, he's trying his best out there. I feel bad for the guy. But the Chiefs, would you consider them the hottest team in the NFL, I guess, besides the Panthers because they're undefeated?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, they're really hot coming into the playoffs, which is really the key time to be hot. So their record is 9-5 right now, but they're making the plays. They're making the plays that they need to make. Obviously, Alex Smith did what he needed to do. He was 21 of 25 for 171 yards and a touchdown. I think with the way that they've been playing, they should definitely be a worry for some of those teams that they will potentially face in the playoffs. So yeah, I would say that is definitely a fair assessment to call them the hottest team right now in the NFL, next to the Carolina Panthers.
It amazes me because they started off 1-5. They have an 8-game winning streak. So, man, yeah, we'll see how well that carries into the playoffs, assuming that they continue to stay on and make the playoffs, which I think everyone expects them to. The Seattle-Cleveland game, man, Cleveland had a lead. Johnny Manziel was very excited about that lead, and then Seattle decided to take it away, ends up winning that game 30-13. Russell Wilson continues to be a nightmare for his opponents. Doug Baldwin continues to be a nightmare for his matchup too. They're pretty hot. They're really rolling. They're locked into a wild card spot, so they're not going to get the home field advantage that they have in the past years. I think that might be something to pay attention to. We'll see how that plays out. What else we got? Got the Packers and the Raiders. Packers pull out that victory 30-20. How'd you feel about the performance there?
It was good enough to get the win. I think it was still a good performance from the Pack. Derek Carr made some mistakes. He threw 2 interceptions, and Aaron Rodgers was good. He had 204 yards and a touchdown. The defense for the Packers played pretty good. I know Morgan Burnett had, I believe, 8 tackles in that game. So he was doing a lot of things on the defensive side. The Packers played well on the defensive side. James Jones had a touchdown catch. So it was a good performance. It was what the Packers needed. They really just needed to go in there, get the victory, get out of Oakland, and focus on the matchups that are ahead, which is, I think as we noted previously, the Cardinals are this coming week, and then, of course, the big game against the Vikings, which could potentially be huge. But the important note for the Packers is that they walked away from that game clinching a playoff spot. So all those cheeseheads in Green Bay can rest easy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, poor Derek Carr. He's really fallen off recently. The next game was probably one of the better ones. I'd say, yeah, if not one of the best of the week. The Broncos and the Steelers. Brock Osweiler came into that game. He started off really well. He came out there, threw 3 touchdowns, looked great. I don't know what happened at halftime. I don't know what happened in that locker room,
something
but
happened.
he lost it. And he lost it hard. He ends up completing under 50% of his passes. Goes 21 for 44, just under 300 yards. He had 3 touchdowns, but he threw a key interception late, and he just couldn't close it out. But one of the best quarterbacks, I think, of his generation, Ben Roethlisberger, could close it out. He ends up with 380 yards, also 3 touchdowns. He had a couple of interceptions, but they get the win, and I think that's a big win. That's kind of a statement win for the Steelers to be able to come back from a rough start and pull that out. I think they're a good team. Again, that whole AFC playoff race is kind of, I wouldn't say foggy, but there's definitely still a lot that could happen. But right now the Steelers are sitting at the 6th seed. So they would face who else than the Denver Broncos first round if everything stays the same right now, which it probably won't. But I don't know. It seems like Brock Osweiler is going to be the guy for at least the rest of the regular season. Do you think that he is the guy going into the playoffs too, or are they looking back to Peyton Manning?
It's tough to say because Peyton Manning, of course, you look at him and he's got the experience, which is that's a huge factor for a team going to the playoffs. You want to have the experienced leader, what Peyton Manning is. I mean, I know I saw something this week I saw a quote from Peyton Manning that, and it wasn't, he wasn't very happy at the notion that so I think a reporter asked him if he would be happy being the backup, and he basically said absolutely not. Might have used a little bit more colorful language, but yeah, I think for the Broncos, if Peyton Manning is healthy, what it comes down to is, who's playing better at the time. Now, of course, Brock Osweiler has been playing really well, except for that second half performance, unfortunately for him and the Broncos. But yeah, the experience, the playoff experience from Peyton Manning really could define whether or not the Broncos would use him or Brock Osweiler going into it.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I think the Broncos are still a contender either way, just because, almost solely because their defense has been spectacular this year. Yeah. Man, the next game we're not going to talk about because it was between the Dolphins and the Chargers. The Chargers won that game 30-14. Congrats to them.
Congrats.
The Bengals and the 49ers. The Bengals pull out a solid win. They actually had a 21-0 lead going into halftime. A.J. McCarron, man, I think we're both pretty big fans of him, and he got the win. It's as simple as that. You got to win games in the NFL. He did.
Yeah, he did what he had to do. He finished the day 15 of 21 for 192 yards. Like you said, he held that 21-0 lead going into halftime, and that's really all they needed to pull out the victory. The 49ers and Blaine Gabbert tried to make a comeback. Man, Blaine Gabbert, 50 attempts, he completed 30 of them for 295 yards, but he threw 3 interceptions. So, unfortunate for the 49ers that they couldn't make that comeback. But, yeah, like you said, I'm a fan of A.J. McCarron, and it's good to see him winning. It's good to see the Bengals were able to win that one, and hopefully that's a confidence booster for him. It's good to play a team like the 49ers who are struggling. It's good for a rookie quarterback to go out there and play a team like that, gain some confidence, and head into next week with the confidence running high.
He's got one of the best offenses around him too. AJ Green, he's got 2 solid running backs, so I think that's important. I think he can definitely succeed in that system.
For sure.
The Cardinals pick up a win against the Eagles, 40-17. Would you say that the Cardinals are the second best team in the NFC or the NFL, or are they even number 1? Are you still saying that the Panthers overrated? Where are they in your mind compared to the rest of the teams in the NFL?
I still think I would say they're the second best team in the NFC. They have that second seed. I still think it's not really debatable that the Panthers are the best team in the NFL right now. It's tough to say whether or not the Cardinals are the second best team, though, because you've got the Bengals and the Patriots, who are both very good teams. Like you said, I think the Cardinals are the second best team in the NFC for sure. But Carson Palmer is doing what he has to do. He's making a lot of big plays. In that game against the Eagles, he went 20 of 32 for 274 yards. So a good performance from him. And this guy David Johnson, he had 187 rushing yards for the Cardinals and 3 touchdowns. That's a monster game from him, and if he continues to produce like that, now granted he was playing the Eagles defense, but if he's able to put up numbers like that, they really can become the second best team in the NFL, and hey, they could beat the Panthers.
Yeah, that's man, and keep in mind he was probably considered to be like the borderline like third running back on that team. If you had Chris Johnson and Andre Ellington. He was good not too long ago, so you could probably consider him the 2. But now David Johnson has taken over the starting role with Chris Johnson out. And man, the Johnsons are working. Chris Johnson did well, and now David Johnson picking it up, and he's having a heck of a couple weeks here. So he's definitely dangerous. And Carson Palmer, he's always been dangerous. Other than that, Monday night game. Pretty good game, 35-27 win for the Lions. Didn't really mean anything, but still good football. So
They're an up and down team, man. They are just, one week they're good, and the next week they're questionable.
Isn't that, man, the Lions? I feel like the Lions could just figure out how to be consistent. Maybe they could be good, maybe they could be decent, but they just don't. They're confused. They're like, oh.
Well, it seems like they have the weapons. They've got Stafford, they've got Megatron, and then all of a sudden you got guys on the defense like Ziggy Ansah who's making huge plays. He got to his first Pro Bowl this season, so they seem to have the weapons. But yeah, like you said, it's a matter of finding that consistency that they're looking for.
We'll see, but I think that wraps up Week 15 pretty well. Other than that, that was a fun week. There were some pretty good matchups. I don't know. I think once you get down to this time of year and you kind of get some important matchups, it definitely gets a little more exciting. But moving on to Week 16, we have a couple really good matchups, I think, in my opinion, for Week 16. The one I really want to highlight first is between the Patriots and the Jets, which has long been like a very popular primetime matchup, especially when Rex Ryan was in New York. I miss that. I miss Rex Ryan versus Patriots games. So the best. But yeah, Patriots and the Jets. This is, I think, the most important game of the year for the Jets right now. They're sitting right outside the playoffs, and they're going up against probably the best team in the AFC. I don't know. How do you feel about that game? What do you think is going to happen? Technically that's a home game for the Jets, but they're so close that...
Yeah, there'll be plenty of fans on the other side. Yeah, I think it'll be a good game for sure. I think the Jets are really going to have to play well on defense, and their offense is going to have to produce quickly. Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to have to go out there, and he's going to have to throw some early touchdowns, and the defense is going to have to shut down Tom Brady. And like you said earlier, if Julian Edelman is back, that could mean a lot for the Patriots offense and for Tom Brady going forward. Like you said, it's a defining game for the Jets as far as their playoff hopes go. So they may come out. For them, hopefully they come out with some more. What's the word I'm looking for? Urgency. Yeah, hopefully they'll come out with some more urgency than maybe the Patriots. The Patriots might be comfortable where they are, so it could be a really good game. I think it really will be a good game, but we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Man, other than that, very important game for you. We have talked about it or mentioned it, I think, twice so far. The Packers and the Cardinals in Arizona. This is the biggest game of the week, I think, for sure. There's
Yeah,
another
definitely.
good one coming up, but this is definitely number one for Week 16. Packers, they've been starting to find their rhythm a little better, but something you would hate for a team that's starting to find their rhythm is a incredibly tough matchup with an incredibly tough defense, and that comes in the Cardinals this week. I mean, again, with the playoffs in the NFC are almost set, but still some. I mean, if not playoff implications, there's bragging rights, and there's a lot of confidence there too to go in there and beat a team that has 10+ wins for either side. The final game of the week on a Monday night, 7:30 on ESPN, coming from Denver, Colorado, will be the Bengals and the Broncos. And I think it'll be a good game, but I think there's a really interesting matchup that's going to be the highlight, and it's going to be A.J. McCarron versus Brock Osweiler, two young quarterbacks who had a lot of success in college and, definitely were someone to watch coming out of college, and then were backing up two of the best quarterbacks in the league, and now they get their chance to start due to injuries. So this will be a fun one. This is a matchup between an 11-3 team, the Bengals, and the 10-4 Broncos. Being in Denver, I think that gives them the advantage, especially because A.J. McCarron's only had one game. But how do you think he's going to fare against probably the best defense in the league right now in Denver? And this could end up being a struggle for A.J. McCarron.
Yeah, and I think, especially if the Broncos come after him, they've got pass rushers like Von Miller who, if they make A.J. McCarron uncomfortable early in the game, it could really spell danger for the Broncos offense. Of course, the Broncos have or rather the Bengals offense. I may have confused those. The Broncos have a solid secondary as well, so it definitely could be a tough game for the Bengals offensively with A.J. McCarron, but it'll definitely be his toughest match of his NFL career so far, and it certainly could define him as a quarterback this early in his career.
That'll be a good one, and it's nice. Most people, at least all the students, are going to be off of school. Some people will have work off too, or have taken it off for the holidays. Everyone's going to be tuned into that game. That's I think the best matchups in Week 16. Everything else is not as great, but every NFL game can be good. That does us for the NFL, but the great news about ending the NFL is that it's the time for the weekly rant.
Oh yeah,
I get the weekly rant this week. Tanner, I know you're preparing hard for next week. But man, this week I've had strong feelings about this for a while. It still bugs me all the time when I watch NFL games. The difficulty nowadays to be a defensive back in the NFL, to me, is just unbelievable. It seems like there's a penalty for everything that a defensive back wants to do. You can't. I swear, you can't put a hand on a receiver before the ball is in the receiver's hands, or else you're gonna get flagged for a penalty. It's either illegal contact or pass interference or holding. I really can't stand it. I just want to see teams be able to play. I want to see. I'm someone who loves defense. I'm a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, and they've played great defense for a long time now. I love defense, and I think it's been limited a lot by the NFL and the penalties that they put out there all over. But again, especially in the secondary, wide receivers are so freakishly athletic nowadays. It's hard enough to cover them, but when Antonio Brown is running past you and you put a hand on his shoulder to try and keep up with him, and immediately get called for a flag, and it's an immediate first down for them. It makes it impossible. I think we've seen a huge scoring increase over the years, and I think it's just a lot due to limitations on defensive backs. There's rules, hit on a defenseless receiver. I get that they're trying to make this league safer, but sometimes when I hear them call hit on a defenseless receiver on DBs or linebackers, it kind of sounds to me like when that person catches the ball, you're supposed to let them touch the ground and be able to defend themselves before you hit them when you're trying to knock that ball loose. I don't know. It's so frustrating for me because I just want to see people play, and they establish these rules to make the game safer, but, you know, players are going down left and right no matter what. There's always going to be injuries. You know, they know what they sign up for. Just let the guys play. Just let them play. That's what I've got.
Yeah, and that's the weekly rant. Yeah, I know what you mean, and it can be really frustrating, especially for, like you said, a fan of defense. But the NFL makes the rules, so they get to see what they want to see. So that was the weekly rant. Well done, Garrett. Our last little portion of this podcast episode is, in fact, some college football. Why don't we talk about the college football? Of course, we're in bowl season, so, you know, as of right now, there's not a lot of huge bowl. You know, it seems like with college football, everybody gets into a bowl game. No matter if you're good or not, there's a bowl for everybody. I don't know. I think,
I don't know
I mean,
did you ever hear when they were talking about that there were so many teams that didn't have strong records and strong strength of schedule and everything that they started looking at academic performance of the team on how to get into the bowl game? That came out not too long ago, and yeah, they said that they were mentioning academic performance as a factor. That's when you know there's too many. That's when you got to set that limit and say, all right, if we're pulling away from the actual football
That's
part
enough.
of the game, let's minimize it. But yeah, man,
Right.
I mean, North Carolina A&T versus Alcorn State. How is that a college bowl game? I don't know. Explain that one to me.
I don't know. And some of them are just like the Camellia Bowl, I'm guessing, between Ohio and Appalachian State. I mean, both of them had decent records, but I don't know. Some of these names for the bowls, questionable. Now this past Saturday, there was a lot of bowl games. Obviously, I just mentioned one, the Camellia Bowl. The biggest match of the Saturday was the BYU Utah game. Now, if you didn't get a chance to watch that game, you missed out, because that was a crazy game. Basically, Utah comes out there. BYU comes out there, and Tanner Mangum, the freshman quarterback for BYU, who's an outstanding quarterback, throws 3 pick sixes in the first quarter. BYU also fumbles, and ultimately, when the first quarter is said and done, they're losing 35-0. And that would come back to haunt them, because as the game would go on, they played such a fantastic game, BYU did. They were the better team in that game. They beat Utah. They were much better than Utah. It was just the unlucky start to the game where Mangum, and some of these pick sixes weren't even, some of them were just, tipped up in the air and just happened to fall to a Utah guy. One of them was a pass interference. The BYU guy got tackled before the ball came to him, and that allowed the ball to be intercepted. So just an unlucky start for BYU, but they had a heck of a performance. They came out and just dominated Utah for the rest of the game. Defense didn't allow any more touchdowns. BYU scored 4 touchdowns and ultimately came up short, losing by the score of 35-28. So a really good performance. That was Bronco Mendenhall's farewell game for BYU. After the game, BYU announced that they would be hiring Kalani Sitake, the defensive coordinator for Oregon State. He is the new BYU head coach. So good things in the future for that BYU team. I'll tell you what, Garrett, watch out for Tanner Mangum, because he's real deal. I don't know if you've seen Tanner Mangum play, but just to give you a comparison, he was in, I believe it was like the Under Armour, one of those Under Armour high school like challenge games, something like that. And he was co-MVP with a man by the name of Jameis Winston in that game. So
The Jameis Winston?
The Jameis Winston. So if that tells you anything about how good he is or how good he will be, definitely be looking out for him in the future. So
All right. Got my eye on him. I'll watch him.
Keep an eye on him. Other than that, there weren't a lot of big headline games in this Saturday Bowl. Saturday Bowl games. Not too much going on. What do you got this week?
This week, today got Boise State versus NIU. Seems like every decent Geneva high school football player goes to NIU. So I'll be watching that one. Georgia Southern versus Bowling Green. Not too many crazy matchups. San Diego State versus Cincinnati might be decent. It's in Hawaii. I'd love to go to that bowl.
Yes.
Miami, Washington State later in the week. We got, UCLA versus Nebraska is probably the best one. That'll be on the 26th. And then 28th, we got Pittsburgh versus Navy. And then 29th, again, North Carolina versus Baylor. That'll be a good game, actually. That'll be a fun one to see how North Carolina shows up in that one. And then LSU versus Texas Tech is also that day. But then it takes us to December 30th, which we will cover next week. So there's some decent games, a couple good ones at the tail end of the week there that we will recap next week. But I think that pretty much does us in. You got anything else you want to mention?
Not really. As far as college football goes, really looking forward to those New Year's Eve matchups. You know, the big games against, or the big playoff games with Oklahoma and Clemson and Michigan State, Alabama. Those will be fun to watch, definitely. That'll really prove who deserves to be number one in the nation.
Yeah, well, I think that does us. We'll definitely get into those playoff games a little more extensively next week. That'll be fun, man. It's a good time of year for sports, as we mentioned. It's really starting to hit the hot part of the year for college and pro sports with NFL playoffs, college playoff, and then March Madness in a few months. So, but man, I think that about wraps us up. Thank you for tuning in again. This was our fourth week of the B&O Sports Show. We really hope you enjoyed it. But for that, I'm Garrett Otto, alongside Tanner Ballard, and you guys all have a good day. Thank you.